10x your service design offering with Smaply. Take 20% off any order with This Is HCD 20 off. Let's superpower you and your design team's potential. Sign up at smaply.app. Enjoy the episode from your friends at Smaply, helping support This Is HCD podcast.
Hi, and welcome to Power of 10, a podcast about design operating at many levels, zooming out from thoughtful detail through to organizational transformation and onto changes in society and the world. My name is Andy Polaine. I'm a service design and innovation consultant, educator, coach, and writer. My guest today is leadership and executive coach Tutti Taygerly. She has over 22 years as a design leader, working at startups and large companies, most recently at Facebook. And throughout her career, she's been building products as well as culture. Tutti, welcome to Power of 10.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for having me.
So, gave you the kind of one-liner bio there. Who are you? And tell us, how you got to here from where you were.
Whew, long story. I'll try and bottom line it. I think that just throughout my career, I've always loved design and have never been quite sure that I was a real designer because I didn't have a graphic design background. I didn't have a visual design background. And instead, I came around to design from a psychology, a human-computer interaction fascination. When I was at school at Stanford, I studied all the things I was interested in. I was a computer science major for 2 years just because I'm fascinated by the logic and that understanding of machines, but then realized that I was slowly getting so much more fascinated with philosophy, psychology of mind, and ethics. And I was able to wrap that all into a major they called symbolic systems with a focus on human-computer interaction, which is a precursor to a lot of the design school work at Stanford right now.
Yeah.
Really lucky to be able to see that and then do a ton of this bunch of work through my 22-year career. And I'm always a designer now, even though I may have questioned it at points through there. It's
really interesting, isn't it, that idea that still designers, I often wonder if conductors, most conductors, orchestra conductors are musicians, that they can play something too. But I wonder if there's a thing there of, well, I'm not really a musician because they don't really say I'm not really a musician because I just wave a stick, right? But it is that thing that if it's not explicitly a kind of like visual design you mentioned, then you don't really feel like a kind of real designer.
Well, a lot of the designers I used to work with and some of the clients that I coach right now struggle with this dilemma, which is if I go into management, do I take away from getting my hands dirty in the craft of design, and am I really a designer? And
anymore, you mean?
Anymore, exactly. Yeah. And do I still have it? Could I still do it? Could I still jump back in? And when I talk to some of these people, I think the first question I get to is just why? What's your why? Why are you doing this? For what? To serve who and for what end?
In terms of the leadership thing, or in terms of just what they're doing in general?
In terms of why are they attracted? Why do they do the work they do? And for some people, it's to make stuff. I need to make something, a product, an interface that is absolutely gorgeous, and it's from the sheer joy of making it. Could be a selfish, pure joy. I want this out in the world. For the others, it's to service a need for a person using it. And then I think for many people who are less hands-on in the pixels, it's really to serve and create a bigger process, culture, body of work to enable and serve others. And that's a journey that I personally made from being a maker of products and pixels to maybe being more of a maker of processes and culture. And in a way, that's been a surprisingly seamless theme into doing what I do now, which is leadership coaching and getting the best out of people.
So I do a similar thing and coach people in design leadership. And one of the things, I just wrote a piece actually, I finished it last night, which was about this idea of the dip, which is that thing you're describing where you're kind of giving up and I think a lot of designers go through this, where you're giving up your tools or your craft skills, that very explicit stuff that you talked about at the beginning that makes you feel like I am a designer, and you move into an area that you may well not have been trained in at all, depending on your education. In sort of comparison to, say, someone who's been in sort of management consulting or project management stuff, where kind of managing people and process and so forth is kind of what you've done from the very beginning. So it's just to sort of expand. Whereas for designers, there's often a bit of a kind of 90-degree turn there. And the dip is where you're kind of letting go of your tools, skills, and still gaining the other ones. And so you're kind of a bit rubbish at both. And it can be a real psychological shock. It can be a real kind of confidence dent. What was your experience of that?
I think that my path to design has always been a fascination with people and machines.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's been more towards the machine. Sometimes it's been more towards the people. And I'm a restless soul. I like a lot of different things and variety. So there's been a lot to keep me busy.
Do you think it helped that you didn't kind of, you said before you didn't sort of obviously identify as a designer at the beginning. Do you think that's helped you make that kind of shift?
Definitely. Because I don't think I was in deep training, learning, competency, skill set as being like the best graphic designer or the best animator or the best motion designer.
So your identity wasn't sort of hung up on that.
Yeah, I think I was good at a lot of things, and very specifically just around this fascination with people. My first job, actually, I started out as a researcher for about 6 months before I realized that I loved the research, but I also needed to create and make.
And then so when you've kind of were starting to make, what was the thing that was giving you the kind of buzz out of that? Because there's a lot of drudge work with making too, right? Necessary kind of, I say drudge work, there's lots of kind of, there's hard work. I mean, I have a thing, for example, where I feel I'm kind of cursed with the ability to see that typography isn't working, but I absolutely don't have the patience that a good typographer has, and therefore don't have the skill to get it right. And so, so there's that kind of, there's a bit of a delay. There's that, there's patience and sort of hard graft, and you need something to carry you through. It's actually what Seth Godin talks about as the dip. There's something every project has that kind of thing where, this is just work right now. What carries you through?
It's interesting because I think I have a surface level answer and a deeper answer.
Well, let's have both.
And the surface answer, which is almost, do you find that, especially when you talk to a lot of people, give a lot of interviews, you have a practiced kind of surface level answer? Like when people ask you in interviews, what are some of your strengths? What's your design superpower? All of this stuff. And the surface answer I always clung to for many years, was a little bit like this power of 10. Like the satisfaction of being able to zoom out and see the big, tall meta view. What is this? Why does it really matter? How does it connect to everything else? The systems design part of it.
Yeah.
And then also be able to zoom down to one little micro interaction and obsess about it. And then back up and down again. And, increasingly towards just the middle and end of my career, it was more spending time zooming up and spending time zooming down to work with designers to help them see the up and the down. And so that's been the part that I've enjoyed the most, and the process of it, and knowing that at any point in time you're in one of these levels of zoom, but it'll change to be able to shift and get a new perspective, to get a new insight.
But that's quite I found, and that's the thing actually I've always looked for in people when I've been hiring. It's also what I've been looking for when I've seen conflict going on or sort of misunderstanding more. There's a real art to knowing which level of zoom you're at, right? And which one you should be working at. Because often you might know that you're in a kind of a level of detail, but actually you need to kind of go up a level.
And where's the mismatch? because the rest of the team or the stakeholders are in a different level of Zoom.
Right. And often sort of a conversation around sort of one level of Zoom around detail is expected to somehow kind of transform the business in some way without the business tackling any of the kind of broader structural stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Which is a common thing of like, we need to improve our CX, and can we kind of make some moments that matter and wow moments and sort of fiddle with that stuff without actually dealing with the broader Zoom and the expectation that the CX team should somehow make that happen, right?
Yeah. And also on the other hand, that as a designer, there's one thing that only you can do and can be really, really good at the detailed level. And simply getting just the right hit for the right animation or detailed transition gets so much emotional resonance from stakeholders that you immediately buy or receive a level of trust and understanding, which allows for some of the deeper work around, whatever product or service is being created.
Yeah, the details matter. There's a famous Eames quote actually, called, and I think it's something like, the details are not the details; they are the product.
Yep.
Where it's very easy to kind of dismiss, I think, that's just the kind of detail. But as I think right now, because as we're talking, we're right in the middle of the sort of coronavirus crisis, and things around the way you talk about stuff, things around small touch points around. So I have a lot of American friends who are applying for kind of financial help, and the details of that process are just kind of making it all fall apart. And so they have kind of massive social consequences, right?
Well, even in this conversation, it's hard for me to talk about zooming to the different levels without having another Zoom come to mind.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's that one too. Yeah. And that's quite a good example of Zoom, of the app Zoom, of what I can only perceive from the outside, and obviously you only ever see the outside, of conversations that maybe should have happened that didn't happen very early on. And of course, once you suddenly hit a kind of growth spurt, the question is, well, if you don't have that conversation early, when do you have it, right?
Or you have it when it's the absolute right time.
Well, or you have it in a crisis,
people
right?
Is now, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Andy, to your earlier question, I think I answered it with this kind of perspective and different levels in meta view as the practiced answer.
Oh, okay. Well, that's still quite deep though. So what's the deeper answer then?
Well, I think the deeper answer is to do with the transition that I made last year for a second act, a different career. And, over time, as I started doing more and more projects, I started wondering what was the meaning behind it. And for me, one of my curses and blessings is that I have worked both on enterprise apps and consumer apps, and I've done a large variety of work on both iterative, large-scale redesigns, reworks. For example, I worked on that for the Facebook ad system.
Yeah.
And then a lot of net new blue sky 0 to 1 concept work. And I'm completely drawn, passionately in love with the latter.
Right.
And meaning for me was harder to find in that because just with the nature of anything new and different, there's going to be a ton of failures. Yeah. There's going to be a ton of, let's try this for a little while. Oh, it's not getting enough traction. All right, let's change. Let's do something different. And what I started to notice over the last probably 5 years of my design career was that the things that stood in mind to me was not the amazingness of a product launch or the satisfaction of seeing just the impact of a product to a person when they get to use it for the first time, like when it shifts their lives, when it, enables to have new forms of livelihood. Because I worked on video creator tools for a while, video creator platforms to enable creators to make a business by publishing what they love and shooting video of it on Facebook. That was wonderful. But ultimately, the thing that really drove me and that I remembered day over day, week over week was the people. The designers, the product managers, the engineers, the salespeople, the marketing people, the leadership, just those tiny little interactions, relationships, just memories.
And what out of that triggered you? Because there's a kind of restlessness in the thing that you just said about kind of always going from sort of 0 to 1 and this new thing. I didn't quite work. Let's do the next thing. And I'm often quite jealous sometimes of people who say, well, I've been doing this thing. So the jeweler who made my wedding ring, for example, and she does new things every time, but they're extensions of her existing craft. I think it's a real problem in the kind of digital world, right? Because our tools change so quickly, and it's like all that craft skill you've built up, and obviously the experience remains, but a lot of the craft skills, and suddenly there's a new program out and you're like, oh no, I have to kind of not sort of throw half of that out and learn this whole new thing again. There's a kind of restlessness in that. What about that and the kind of people stuff you were seeing what triggered that shift for you to go, okay, I'm going to make this change?
I think that there's a desire to have kind of one thing happened and then X led to Y. And I think the honest truth is it was something that was gathering and building over time.
Yeah.
I'd spent 10 years in design agencies. So fun, really fed my restlessness, right? 3 months coming up with the future of connected TVs, the next vision of the connected home for, the world's largest companies. And yet I think I worked on 70 some projects in one company over 5 years, and three made it out to ship.
Right.
And so that was one first inflection point where it was like, this has been amazing. I've gotten the joy of thinking and creating and variety and flexibility of projects, yet it's less meaningful because I want to see it through. Kind of this first push-pull between the restlessness and the really seeing something through for long-term impact. So that was one first inflection point. And I think the second was going to startups, where I was at a enterprise big data startup for 2 years, where it was amazing to go from just the kernel of an idea to MVP, V1, V2 of the product, and just see how drastically it had to change. And it being just the interface, as well as ways of monetization, ways of having it as on-prem versus on the cloud, just different things that. And I felt like that hooked me to be like, that was the variety. To see the variety through all the different phases with different ways of people interacting with it. So that was a second inflection point. And then the last was probably just a combination where I knew it was time to leave Facebook, but I still felt that I was going to stay in design and find another job in design. And as a lark on the side, because I'd been coaching on the side at Facebook for about maybe 3.5 years. And this is in addition to my team, but just coaching other people and running leadership workshops. I just thought I would dive in and do a series of coaching training. So I would be a better listener. So I'd be a better leader. So I would, just get better at this craft of design that I'm doing, this craft of leadership. And then I got so hooked, just the sense of flow and energy and connectedness and passion through doing this. And just, in maybe my third 3-day workshop was the big, a little bit reluctant, but also, very excited. Wow, this is what I'm going to do.
This is it. And was it reluctant because you knew you were having to kind of give up something else if you were going to go wholeheartedly into this, or what was the reluctance? I
think it's reluctant because I'm a skeptic. I've learned that when something draws me, there's always an initial reluctance. Like, that's how I've learned to follow I've learned to follow my reluctance and frustration and cautiously being intrigued and being drawn deeper and deeper. So the reluctance is a very personal, familiar feeling of oh man, it's happening. All right. Wasn't sure I was ready for this. Wasn't sure I wanted this, but wow, this is right. Oh my gosh, everything's going to change.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you probably find this in your coaching too, that how much we fear the thing that we should be doing, and that pattern seems to come up over and over again. And how people, I don't know what it is like for your coachees, but how people then sort of talk themselves down from it or talk themselves small and kind of, self-sabotage and have the editor inside your head and all of the rest of it.
Yeah, it's weird. I think it's very, very human. We love familiarity and routines, In San Francisco, I think this is week 6 or 7 of shelter in place. And there's a routine and there's a rhythm. And I think
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, please, go ahead.
No, go on, you say.
I think that there's a time and a place for every individual person in their context to settle into routine and rhythm and comfort. And it depends what your focus is for that period of your life. And I think at some points in time, there's a shift, there's a trigger, there's a yearning for change and something different. And that happens and boom, that's the trigger for another shift. And it's completely new and different, similar to having children.
Yeah. Many
people have a yearning. It's the time. Sometimes it's an external expectation. Sometimes it's an internal. It's the time to have kids. And, when you're in it, especially with young ones under 5, and especially now for the parents who have to play that double shift, it's hard. It's really, really hard, but yet also very, very satisfying and meaningful. Yeah. And
it's interesting. I'm convinced that humans see the entire world in terms of relationships to other humans. That's why we anthropomorphize stuff all the time. I believe our kind of relationships to companies and services and stuff are like that too. And that's why we get so annoyed when it feels like a company treats you in a way that you wouldn't treat another person, because it feels kind of wrong. And that's why I have such a I'm so irritated often by sort of HR policies and stuff, which weirdly, given the name, take the human out of kind of those relationships often. But as you were talking about that kind of startup, and doing all these different things and then wanting to it really sounded like I've had lots of kind of relationships and flings, and it's all been very exciting, but now I quite like to kind of settle down and have the long-term relationship, and then, maybe see and have children and settle in it. And there's a different kind of change that settles in, which is instead of constantly changing and having something new and the excitement coming from that, the excitement comes from watching the same thing evolve and change and experiencing those changes, which is true of relationships too. But it was kind of struck me as you were kind of talking about it, and then you went on to the kids thing. And I think that's part of it's part of growing older, I think, but I think that's also part of would suggest that's part of that journey into kind of design leadership, to bring it back to that, which is I don't need the new thing all the time that I'm making. Actually, you start to take a kind of longer view of things. Has that been your experience, or do you interpret that differently?
It's the longer view of things. I remember I was chatting with one of the design leaders at Facebook, and he and I were having this conversation because I was working on some of this new, really hard work, which is how to make video very meaningful and inspire a sense of connectedness for Facebook watchers, and not just be passive popcorn light entertainment.
Yeah.
And we were having this conversation, and I was really frustrated because we tried a bunch of different things, and he asked me, well, how long do you think this is going to take? And I just was 6 months. And he laughed and laughed.
Why?
Because we're changing or trying to just have people's behaviors and perceptions of this giant brand be changed. That's not a 6-month endeavor.
Right.
Like, I believe it can happen, but I don't know what amount of time it will take, and if we have the patience to keep doing it over the time. And I thought
you were going to say the opposite.
I don't know if it's a 2-year, 3-year, 5-year. Well, it's a hard problem. The harder the problems, perhaps the more meaningful they are and the longer they'll take. I mean, you'll get lots of quick little wins, right? And get data around quick little wins and little experiments for one segment of person. But how do you do it wholesale at scale? That for me is the long view. It's the long view, similar to, as you were saying, just leadership, culture, people. Takes time to adapt.
I thought you were going to say he was laughing because 6 months is like kind of 6 years in Facebook, kind of in Facebook years, in Facebook time. That because I sort of imagined that, the response would be, no, it needs to be much quicker than that, and so on and so forth.
Oh, he was a wise man. He is a wise man. And, in 6 months, we'll launch 4 new products.
Yeah. Right.
Launching is easy.
Do you think so Witz was talking about age quite a lot here. Do you think it's possible to be a young design leader?
Absolutely. I mean, look at just the energy coming from, I'd say even beyond design. So many young leaders and entrepreneurs and co-founders. Yeah, I think there's different ways to lead.
Yeah. Tell me about those.
And maybe the two that I bifurcate into is like maybe, I haven't thought of this super deeply, so we'll play with it here along the way. But there's a leadership in depth of technical knowledge and expertise. Whether it's I am the most brilliant engineer, anything that I or we dream up, I can code and make into existence in, a couple days. There is very much just a leadership and persuasion of I'll build it. I'll make it. And if the thing is that I made is intriguing enough, that gets others on board and drawn to whether it's the thing I made, the fact that I have the competency to make it that quickly. There's one model of leadership there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And another, my cat is now fascinated by this microphone.
Yeah, that's what I can see.
Another.
We're going to get some purring in the mic in a minute.
Oh, she is a loud purr, so she might know she's making her way to my lap. That's the problem. And I think the difference is there is almost a single kind of command and control type of leader, which is that type of leader that I talked about. Could also be the brilliant creative director, who through her vision and strength and, beauty and craft will show that this is the right way. And in a crit, everyone looks at that and that's absolutely the right thing. And that can come from the creative director, or it can come from the guy who just graduated from college and has like the latest, newest, youthful ideas, but he's the creative leader in the room by virtue of his work.
It's interesting, I think, in those two. I mean, if I think sort of archetypically, it's almost the sort of difference between a warrior and a queen, let's say. And the warrior is kind of showing through their craft, what that leadership. And in the example of the creative director that you said, there's obviously craft embedded in that, but actually in the way they talk about it and the narrative and the storytelling, the ability to, to really kind of inspire people through a story and explaining the vision of the story of a vision. Is a different kind of set of leadership skills. Some people seem to be, if not born with that, they certainly seem to grow up with that. It comes more naturally to them than others. When you're coaching, because I think this is a thing that comes up quite a lot in coaching, which is, I feel like I need to have more presence. I don't have the kind of skill to kind of communicate, because a lot of that at that level is less, a lot of the difficulty is less around kind of, this is a difficult design problem than this is, I need to convince enough people and stakeholders to sort of come along the journey with me.
Absolutely.
And a lot of that kind of self-sabotage and a lot of that kind of feeling like don't have this yet is around building up that skill. How do you go about, or is that a thing that you recognize, and how do you go about coaching people to get there?
Yeah, super familiar. I think every leader goes through it.
Yeah.
You know, from the imposter syndrome, who am I to be here? Look at all these people all around me, and to the feeling that, wow, look at all these different types of leadership presence, this executive presence from, different examples from, the quintessential, this is how Steve Jobs led, to, this is how someone like Sundar Pichai leads, or this is how someone like Marissa Mayer leads. And I'm not like that. I don't look like them. I don't have that confidence, that wisdom, those years, whatever it is. Super, super familiar. I think it's very human. We all go through it. And I work with some emerging leaders to really identify their leadership voice, because what's gotten them here isn't necessarily going to get them there.
Yeah.
You may be the best, highly crafted designer, and that's why you're going to get promoted to manager. Yeah. But entirely different set of skills. And what I do with a lot of these people that I coach is really go back to, I talked about this earlier, go back to the why. Why is it that you do the work you do? What parts of the work energize you? And I use the word energize because you can have positive or negative energy, but I'm looking for the amplitude and magnification of energy. But what stuff energizes you so you're in this complete state of flow, perhaps inherently like immensely frustrated because you're trying to solve this problem, or fascinated by it, and we're just in this state of joyous or frustrated flow. And then look for, what are you good at? What are your natural strengths? And what are your values? What really matters to you and has mattered to you since childhood, adolescence, early adulthood, just what has seemed to be these themes. What are the values you have, and what are the aspirational values that you want? When you look at some of these leaders, not just them as like this end-to-end just person, but what is it about their leadership that you would aspire more for? And kind of looking at all this as the basis for, this is you. This is you as a leader. This is a draft, a foundation of you as a leader. And how do we work to run lots of experiments to be like, all right, you want more bold confidence. Like if boldness is one of your values, let's try running a number of different experiments for acting more boldly. How does that feel? Does that feel like uncomfortable but good? Or does that feel entirely not you? That just gives you more data, more indications that you want more of that. Absolutely. And that naturally fits you.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I have this thing that I kind of think leadership has been a bit sort of fetishized, and particularly in a kind of white male, and I'm white, middle-class, middle-aged male way of, here's in that sort of HBR way of kind of, here's the 7-step framework to kind of leadership qualities or whatever. And I've kind of seen people kind of execute that stuff. I mean, it really feels like, when someone does active listening, but they do it in a way that you kind of know they're doing active listening, and somehow you kind of feel like now you're not listening because you're thinking about active listening, and there's this kind of weird thing that there's this kind of whole idea of kind of leadership has these qualities, and it's been like studied to pieces. And if you could only just kind of then reverse engineer that and just do those things, then it'll kind of work for you. But, just listening to you there, and we talk about going right back to childhood, which is so much where a lot of that stuff a lot of the kind of blockers come. There's a
saboteurs rise from things
there's a great
patterns that worked for you in childhood.
Right. Yeah. Marc who's got this great book called Do Present, and I'm hopefully have him on the show soon. He has this great question that he asks people in his workshop about presenting, which is, who stole your voice? And when I kind of read it, I thought, I can just see how that, cuts to the heart of things. Because obviously, people then come to a moment of like, they know exactly. There's not many people, I imagine, who say, I don't really know. I reckon most people can really kind of pinpoint it. And, it's interesting when you're talking about people aspiring, to people like Steve Jobs and so forth. And I was really pleased the other day when someone said to me, Michelle Obama. I thought, oh, great. Thank God it's not, Steve Jobs or another.
I know. I heard myself say it and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I said Steve Jobs. That's like the mark of do not talk about Apple. Do not talk about Steve Jobs. Ugh.
But, there's a person with kind of, huge charisma, huge talent, huge sort of attitude and, lots of, that doesn't come without its shadow side either, right? As all the millions of kind of things written about him and stuff show. But what's interesting about it is, I can't be Steve Jobs and nor can you. You can't be Michelle Obama. You can only be Tutti and I can only be Andy. But to try and kind of find that sort of tuning fork or that kind of radar that you're talking about, which is try a little bit of, and I talk about it as experiments with, because I think that lands really well with designers and design leadership. Because I think designers, I found at least, have a bit of an allergic reaction to that kind of HBR type of kind of executive leadership kind of structural stuff. I think they much more respond to this idea of, well, here's an experiment. It's just like designing something and you iterate on it and you get feedback. You're kind of prototyping your leadership, as it were, as you go. But it's a kind of tuning thing. The validation was also that you're your own sort of user in that respect of kind of tuning into, well, you sometimes speak to people and they come alive and they're talking about a certain thing and you can just kind of see it. And then sometimes you can kind of see them sort of shrink back again. And I think it's such a lovely way of thinking about that journey. Have you got a favorite experiment on that front, or is it very personal depending on who you're coaching?
It's very personal. And I have to come back and say that I love frameworks and processes. So I gobble up all of the ones from HBR and grief theory and change management theory. Yeah. And I've always been a systems designer. So, and what I love is providing the context of experiments within a framework, because that's what a framework is. It's a way of modeling and organizing the chaos of the world in a new concept into a framework that's more easily digestible for others. So I love putting the context of the experiment into a framework. And the ones I tend to push people more to are the ones that are less familiar to them. So I primarily work with technologists, co-founders, tech CEOs, engineers, product and designers. And I find all of us in this world are very driven. We're problem solvers. We build things. We get things done very efficiently, very well. We do roadmaps. We do all of this. I don't think many of the people I coach need help with that. They're high performers. They know how to do this. So the experiments I push towards are more of the unfamiliar, which is some of the stuff that can seem more woo-woo, except that it's really firmly grounded in neuroscience. Yeah. Which is when you're walking into a meeting, how do you want to be? What's your intention for how you want to show up in that meeting? That's a frequent experiment that I've asked people to do. And if someone goes in and be like, well, the thing that I'm going to think about most is the relationship. I want to be relational. Or it's going to be very different from someone walking to a meeting and who's maybe a little bit nervous because they're presenting their designs for the first time. And their intentionality is confident. Or someone walking into a complicated situation and having an intentionality be curious. So the experiment that I ask people to run tends to be more on the emotional, the awareness of their body's side. Yeah. And then I ask them, what was the impact of that? How did that affect the outcome of the meeting? And if I was coaching maybe yoga teachers, the experiment would be more towards the other. Try doing this and see what happens. It's more just about disrupting, changing it up because people get into their patterns.
It's interesting. I mean, when I said the thing about frameworks, I mean, I'm similar in that I hoover up stuff, right? I really do kind of, and part of the thing for me, and we were talking right at the beginning about that kind of zooming in and out and stuff. I think people who have those kinds of minds tend to do a lot of, that thing over there is a bit like this thing over here, and that thing over there is a bit, and you look at the kind of similarities between the two, and that's where some of the kind of interesting thinking comes from. Listening to you talking about that, and is those frameworks and those kind of structural things, is what you're doing is bringing them back to be really human. And I think what can sometimes happen with those is they become sort of painting by numbers. And I'm doing, and I've seen people do that. I'm doing, and I'm saying all the things that this said in the book, but it's not really kind of working for me. And I once was in a session. It was a kind of group session, and this person was, lovely guy. He was sort of worried about his executive presence, which is a phrase I don't like very much, but he was worried about his kind of ability to kind of hold a room, basically. Mm-hmm. And we went through a whole lot of stuff, and it ended up with him saying, "So are you saying I can be myself?" And everyone was like, "Yes, absolutely." But he'd felt like he had to be kind of playing a role, and therefore, because it was inauthentic, and whether people know it or not, they sense it, right? He didn't have that kind of presence. And as soon as he actually kind of, and it's actually quite hard to be yourself, because obviously you need to find out what yourself is in the first place. But that really kind of set him on a completely different trajectory. And he really had exactly that experience of like, when we checked in a couple of weeks later, I did this, I was this way in a meeting, and, I sold the project or whatever it was. He just had kind of found himself. It was very nice to see.
If I circle back to a question you asked earlier, which is it possible to be a more youthful leader?
Yeah.
What resonates with the story you just told depends how well you know yourself.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the journey for many of us who are not natural, youthful leaders, it's throughout the years you try on different personas, different identities, and you see how well it works for you. And some people may early on try on a impactful executive presence that's not them, but it works for them so well, they just keep doing it. And for other people, it doesn't. And, if you ask someone every 5 years of their professional career, what's your executive presence? I'm really most interested in the people who have changed, who have found like different ways of expressing it for what's worked externally, for the external validation. You have great executive presence. You can really hold a room versus what feels right on the inside.
Yeah. I think there's a thing there where you can fake it until you make it a bit. So that thing where, I think that is quite a sort of important thing. And that's actually one of the ways, I think, of getting yourself through the dip. And I think what happens a bit later on is that you realize that everyone's faking it, and that's okay. And you become sort of more comfortable with it. And I feel like it's easier. So I'm saying this, I'm 48 now. I'm nearly 49. I think it's easier as you get older. I don't think it's impossible to do this youth. And I really don't want to kind of say to anyone listening to this, hey, you can't be a kind of design leader until you're, old and grey. Because I have also seen kind of youthful
49.
leaders. Yeah, I'm 49. So you can, I've definitely seen youthful leaders or young people kind of leading. I think what happens, I would say, so I'm going to suggest it's easier when you're older, because I think one of the things that happens as you get older is you have less need to kind of prove yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And with that comes a kind of relaxedness of, well, I'm going to go into this meeting and I'm going to just say what I think and how I feel about this. And I don't really care if they kind of think I'm wonderful or not, or, have presence or not.
I mean, here's the thing, Andy, which is maybe a little bit meta, you and I are both grizzled old leaders in our 40s and we're talking about this, and of course we're going to agree, right? And imagine like a podcast with a 20-year-old designer who's leading a team with his guests or her guests. I bet the conversation is equally intriguing and likely with a different flavor to it.
We're the old dinosaurs who don't get it, right?
Yeah, and who are these old people who think that, you need age to be able to lead properly? And it's just interesting shifts in perspective.
Yeah. I think there's there's a radio program that's very famous in the UK called Desert Island Discs. And the whole sort of conceit of it is, what records would you choose if you were going to a desert island? And they use it to kind of, it's a great interview technique because they use it to, people go, oh, well, I chose this song because it's my mum and dad, my dad used to sing it to my mum in the kitchen. And then it's like, oh, really? So tell me about your parents. And then it sort of leads to this kind of whole deep conversation. But one of the things about it is that's really great is you hear actors in particular, or sort of celebrities who are have become famous when they're older compared to people who became, or the stories of people who became famous when they're young and kind of what they went through. It's very, very different. And I take a lot of solace in that. So listen, look, we're coming up to time. I ask all of the guests what one thing it has an outsized effect on the world in that kind of zooming in and out thing. Either it could be something that's unappreciated and overlooked, or it's something that's desperately needs to be rethought that would have an outsized impact on the world.
Andy, this has been stressing me out the whole podcast. What is my brilliant answer to this? Two things, because I'm not good at following directions.
You can do two things.
One, for designers, you are amazing at the design process, at the divergence and convergence of making your product or service the best thing possible. Consider applying this design process to you, to your life, to your leadership. Understanding what design principles or values govern your life. Choose your life, your leadership, with intentionality, and apply those principles to design your own leadership. That's a little bit of a soapbox that I talk about a lot. And then the other is as many of us are getting in touch with and realizing through enforced confinement right now, relationships really, really matter.
Yeah.
And we're going to be emerging and entering a new normal at some point. What parts of relationships and connections to different people do you want to redesign? What matters? Who matters the most? What matters about that relationship? What do you want to be true and hold on to over time? I'll leave you with those two.
Those are big things. Those aren't small things. Those are big things, but they're very good things. Where can people find you online? Where do people go to find you?
Yeah, my website is tutti.taygerly.com, and I publish on Medium every week.
Okay, cool.
Come find me. Come chat.
Okay.
I love talking to people.
We'll put
Come chat.
links everywhere. Are you on Twitter too?
I am,
or is that heresy
not as
to ex-Facebook person? Okay. Right.
I'm on all the things, but there's the things that I'm on because I should be on them, and there's the things that I'm on because I love. So.
Okay. We'll put all the links up in the show notes. Thank you so much. It's been a lovely conversation. It's been also lovely to hear your cat purring in the background. It's been quite comforting.
Oh, I wasn't quite sure that came through.
No, it's good. It's good.
Wonderful.
Thanks so much for being my guest on Power of 10.
Thanks, Andy. It was so fun.